Hello and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Joke Rogers at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm joined by Vincent McCory from the Voice of America in Washington.
Thanks, I'm Vincent McCory at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Joke Rogers in Lagos brings you that story.
Every day of the year, approximately 1,000 people worldwide are born with sickle cell disorder, 3/4 of them in Africa. In Nigeria, where 1 of every 100 has it, many don't find out until complications set in. In her annual public lecture held in Lagos, speakers at the National Sickle Cell Foundation Nigeria stressed the need for early detection. Our correspondent, Mary Alala Yusuf, reports.
The Sickle Cell Annual Public Lecture is not just one of the activities to celebrate the World Observance, but an avenue to teach and learn about the disorder. To start off, the chairman of the event comments on progress in knowledge and treatment.
My mother had 7 of us, and most of them died at childbirth. So in fact, in my own time, sickle cell was a death sentence even at birth, because the mothers were not properly cared for.
The main speaker sets the tone for what will be an underlying focus for the day.
Nigeria has been reported to have the highest burden of sickle cell disorder worldwide. However, care is still suboptimal. It is fragmented and uncontrolled.
Interventions in medicine are making people live longer and with less pain.
There are some people who have very high fetal hemoglobin does not know that they have sickle cell disorder. So we found out that one medication that is used to treat cancer, hydroxyurea, can do this. And that is the beginning of the use of hydroxyurea.
Consultant hematologist Professor Titilope Adeyemo stresses that early detection will reduce complications of the condition.
Between the age of 2 and 5, there is a 1 in 10 chance that a child is likely to come down with stroke. That is why we need to know. We need to know those children who are sickle cell, and then among the children who have sickle cell, who are those who have the high risk for stroke, so that we can put in an intervention.
Be done to surmount the challenge.
Some survivors of the disorder give credit to the foundation for its support.
In my 50 years of living with sickle cell, I had no less than 2 blood transfusions a year. You can calculate that, how many blood transfusions. No less than 2. Some I had 3, some I had 4.
I think I got to know Professor Akinshetta when I was 38 years. And ever since I knew him, he brought me to the foundation. I didn't have any cause to regret joining the foundation. All the necessary support we need, as in medications, they supply us with medications.
According to Professor Akinshetta, for more holistic care, many disciplines must be involved.
People with sickle cell disorder need to be managed by a multidisciplinary team, because the complications involve practically every part of the body.
And the foundation anticipates more people seeking care earlier for quicker and more effective intervention.
We already have a strategic plan for where we'll be in the next 10, 20 years. But you can imagine that means we're not going to work on our own. This is the power of networking, the power of collaboration, the power of partnerships. And that's exactly what we're looking at. That's how we're going to be able to tackle the deluge again. And you pointed out, clearly, people are getting more and more aware. And I'm very glad about that development.
There have been many advances in sickle cell disorder care over the years. But experts here agree that more must be done to make comprehensive, multi-sectoral care available for those suffering with the disorder. And researchers should look inwards for local solutions. Mary Alala Yusuf, Channels Television News.
Let's get more on this. The National Director, CEO, Sickle Cell Foundation, Dr. Annette Akinshetta, joins us on the program. Thanks for joining us on Africa 54.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So there was a time when babies born with sickle cell anemia rarely lived past the age of 5. Now, healthcare providers are able to diagnose sickle cell and begin treatment that eases symptoms and complications. At what age does sickle cell stop?
At what age does sickle cell stop? Sickle cell never stops. It's a lifelong illness. It's a hereditary condition. It's something you get from your father and your mother. It's not contagious or infectious. And in other words, you're born with it and you live with it for life, except, of course, you have a cure. You undergo a cure process. And the cure we have today for sickle cell is stem cell transplantation. So unless you undergo that cure, you live with sickle cell for life. So it doesn't stop. And at the top of your remarks, you said indeed that it used to be seen just in children. When I was a medical student, it was considered more or less a pediatric disease seen under the age on children under the age of 5. But with better treatment protocols, like living longer and longer, and to the 7th, 8th, 9th decades of life. So and that's one of our goals, to ensure that they live long, productive lives and they can contribute meaningfully to their communities.
Okay, so what's the difference between, sickle cell trait and the sickle cell disease itself?
Excellent. And now we don't even say disease anymore because of stigma and discrimination.
Condition.
Sickle cell disorder. Sickle cell disorder.
Disorder, right.
Disorder. Yes. So the problem with sickle cell lies in the red blood cell. If you remember your biology, you have red blood cells, white blood cells, and there's a third one. And Joke, do you remember?
Yes, I do.
So the white blood cells, I think people remember that they help us fight infection. The red blood cells help us to carry oxygen around the body. Otherwise, our respiration is not complete. And that is where the problem lies in sickle cell. And then in the red blood cell, there's a substance called hemoglobin. Big word, but simple. It helps attract that oxygen and takes it around the body. Now, the hemoglobin in persons with sickle cell is designated S. And that's hemoglobin. Sickle hemoglobin is not very efficient in carrying around oxygen around the body. And it changes the shape of the red blood cell to become sickle-shaped. That's why it's called sickle cell. Sickle is a farming or harvesting implement. Or I prefer to say it changes the shape of the red blood cell from a nice round or spherical shape to a banana-like shape or a crescent moon. Okay, so, and then the characteristic of the cell also changes. It becomes rigid. It's no longer flexible, rigid, sticky, and at the end of the day, they begin to clump together and block the red blood and block the blood vessels, so that blood and oxygen do not get to the end organs. And when that happens, the body's way of saying there is a problem is pain. Pain is a protective mechanism. Is a protective feedback mechanism to tell you, I have a problem here, so blood needs to reach me. And that's why persons with sickle cell are always encouraged to drink plenty of water to help push the blood cells along. So persons who have hemoglobin S are designated SS, and they're called persons with sickle cell. They used to call them sicklers. We don't call them sicklers anymore because it's also stigmatizing and discriminating. They are living with sickle cell, and they call themselves warriors. Some of us like to call them champions because they've overcome a lot. Now, those who have the trait, I have a trait. We're designated AS. Some of our cells have A. A is what most people in the population have. There's the hemoglobin A, and then some of our cells are S.
Right. So what are the early signs and the symptoms, and how early can, a child start treatment for this condition? Let me couch it like that.
Early diagnosis is something like catching something early, so you begin to treat promptly. And in our center, we have what we call prenatal diagnosis. Before natal birth. So couples can determine the genotype of their unborn child in early pregnancy. There's another one called amniocentesis that they do in later pregnancy, in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy. But we do what we call chorionic villus sampling. You sample the developing placenta in the 1st trimester, and they're able to tell what the patient has. And if the patient is SS, we already take them under our wings and follow the pregnancy. And as soon as they're born, they're part and parcel of our Sickle Cell Foundation Nigeria family. And within the first couple of months, we begin to institute preventative measures in form of penicillin. Penicillin prevents infection as a form of prevention, and also immunizations. They usually get an infection we call pneumococcal infection that affects the meninges, form of meningitis or pneumonia, and that's what tends to kill them before the age of 5. We usually share the statistic that 150,000 babies are born in Nigeria every year with sickle cell, and out of whom over 100,000 do not live to the age of 5. And what normally kills them is infection. And when they don't develop symptoms, they do well and they hit that age of 5. And we're encouraging the Nigerian government to please come on board and dent that statistic of over 100,000 babies dying from sickle cell before the age of 5, because that will help us get that shared within our fora globally when we go for Sustainable Development Goals meetings, because SDG number 3 is health, and there's a target there, SDG number 3, target 2, which speaks to reduction of deaths in children under 5.
Right. We must thank you for your time today on the program. National Director, CEO, Sickle Cell Foundation, Dr. Annette Akinshetta. Thanks for coming on board on Africa 54.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. After the break, with nearly 1 million people displaced internally in Sudan and numbers rising, aid organizations fear dire conditions. Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. The UN estimates that nearly 1 million Sudanese have been displaced by the fighting inside Sudan. Those who have escaped the country and those still inside describe dire conditions. As aid groups say, the number of internally displaced is likely to become much higher. Henry Wilkins reports from Khartoum, Chad.
Rachid Khamis Abdallah escaped from Sudan hours before VOA interviewed him. He says he had been hiding from fighting inside the Sudanese town of Tendelti, just across the border from Chad, when armed men belonging to an ethnic Arab militia group broke into his home.
I was in town and I couldn't get away. The terrorists broke into my house and they took me away. They threatened to kill me. They are everywhere in Tendelti.
He says he was taken to a makeshift prison where he thought he would die. But an imam told the militia members to not kill him and instead release him across the border. Kaloun Adam says she fled Tendelti weeks ago, as soon as the fighting started, but has not heard from her son since.
The armed group destroyed everything. Houses and schools were destroyed, and there was no electricity. People ran away. I tried to find my son. We've been searching but didn't find anything.
Weeks later, he is still missing. Despite their horrific stories, Abdallah and Adam are among the lucky ones. They have escaped Sudan and the violence. Those still in the country face a less certain fate. The UN estimates that more than 843,000 have been internally displaced in Sudan, trying to escape fighting between warring sides that show little regard for civilian life. It expects the number of internally displaced people, or IDPs, to grow.
The population of Khartoum, which is where a lot of the fighting is happening, was estimated to be around 8 million people. That is the hotspot right now. And a lot of the people who are living in Khartoum are fleeing to neighboring states, such as Jazeera, White Nile, etc. And so that number is only expected to rise.
Humanitarian organisations say they've been struggling to get aid into Sudan to help IDPs, but some has begun to trickle in over the past 2 weeks. Aid groups and media lack access to Sudan, so the humanitarian situation for IDPs is unclear. VOA spoke with an IDP whose name we have withheld for her safety, who fled fighting in Khartoum for Port Sudan on the Red Sea coast. She says she had to leave her family behind in Khartoum.
This is the hardest decision I have ever had to make. Several reasons forced me to leave them, as my mom is sick and she can't travel for a long distance. I witnessed beatings, lootings, and shootings for the target civilians in their homes. And lately we started to hear cases of rape.
Victims and health workers have reported numerous cases of sexual violence against women still inside Sudan. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Kafrun, Chad.
Senegalese wrestling, or lamb, evolved from a post-harvest pastime to the country's national sport. Anchored in ancestral war rituals, it blends physical combat with acrobatics, with victory anchored by an opponent's back, meat in the ground. Ozumi discovered the style during a trip to Senegal with Japan's aid agency in 2017. Similar cultures of hospitality known as teranga in Senegal and omotenashi in Japan captivated him also.
In a dusty alleyway surrounded by brick buildings, Japanese wrestler Shogo Ozumi lies face first in the Senegalese sand after having been thrown in the air by an oversized opponent. A moment's pause, then he rises, dusting off and rejoining the conclave of wrestlers wearing little more than lion clothes. Zomi left Tokyo behind and is now committed to mastering Senegalese wrestling and imparting his knowledge of the Olympic wrestling styles on those willing to learn. Every time I practice, I feel myself getting stronger. I feel a lot of joy and growth. Since relocating to Senegal full-time in 2022, Zomi has taken up residence with a community of wrestlers in Thiès, Senegal's third largest city. He has also set up an academy of 36 students who he is helping prepare for the 2026 Youth Olympics. At a national competition last month in St. Louis, Senegalese colonial capital, hundreds jostled for views as Uzomi and Badiena coached their wrestlers from the sidelines. One of their students even went home with a silver medal in her weight class.
South Africans have embraced the continent's first professional cuddling service where customers pay for platonic intimacy. Experts say isolation during the COVID pandemic, which hit South Africa hardest, and stress from its struggling economy are just two reasons why the cuddling business is booming. Zahir Kasim reports from Johannesburg.
For some, it's hard to wrap one's arms around the idea of a professional cuddling service. But the business is gaining popularity in South Africa. One company, Pro Cuddling, is leading the way. It was founded by Florence Letswalo.
You know the term, it takes a village to raise a child. It very much speaks to African cultural tradition. So what happens to somebody else very much matters to me. So yes, it is a business in a sense that you're hiring people to work and you have to pay them, but the core values come from very much the culture of what Africa is all about, which is Ubuntu.
Ubuntu is an African philosophy that promotes brotherhood. She says the contract stipulates that both the client and cuddler can immediately terminate the session if either party says they feel uncomfortable. Letswalo said so far, that has not been an issue.
It's more than just cuddling, yes. It's a very personalized experience, and there's a reason why people book for cuddling. And the main reason, I think, is, loneliness. We live in a society where loneliness is very prevalent. People are extremely busy, and also people don't really have anyone to talk to.
The business has grown rapidly over the last year, according to Letswalo, from having a few requests a week to now having 2 to 3 cuddle appointments a day. She says her staff has also grown to about 50.
The ethos of Ubuntu have to do with taking care of the other, has to do with brotherhood, with sisterhood, And for me, it's a classical way of making sure that even the service is an extension of that. The only difference is that it's a credible space that you have to pay for it.
Judging by Let Swallow's business, cuddling, more than simply physical touch, is gaining popularity among South Africans as a means towards companionship and human connection. Sayed Kasim for VOA News, Johannesburg.
The European Union is set to sponsor a young Nigerian fashion designer, Oyindamola Aleshiloye, to the 2023 Madrid Fashion Week, holding in September. This is her prize for winning the maiden edition of the Europe Day Afro-Euro Runway Fashion Show held in Abuja. Ms. Aleshiloye, with the brand name Khadiju, was declared winner from among the 7 finalists who had emerged from 124 young Nigerian designers who sent in their entries. Our Channel CV correspondent, Benny Ark, reports.
The Afro-Euro Runway Fashion Show aims to encourage young professionals in Nigeria, and it's organized by the European Union in commemoration of the EU Day under the theme Year of Skill. The event is celebrating the EU's partnership with Nigeria, which is increasingly focusing attention on the youth, innovation and skills.
Our journey started in April, just a few months ago, when we launched this competition, the Afro-Euro Runway competition for young designers. And we tasked them to represent the African and European values through their collections, to create unique designs fusing European and African styles and fabrics, and to create collections that promote the values of diversity and inclusion.
The Afro-Euro Fashion Runway Show had 124 young Nigerian designers who sent in their entries, and after the preliminary stage, 7 finalists were selected and qualified to participate in the runway show. The best 4 were selected for the final stage. Nigerian designer Ms. Oyindamola Aleshiloye, with the brand name Khadiju, emerged winner. According to the judges, the winner was picked using the 5 components of the theme for the competition, including interpretation of Afro-Euro fusion, creativity, execution, cohesiveness, presentation, and storytelling. Samira Mohammed came second, Oluchi George came third, and Happiness Miwori came fourth.
It's absolutely amazing that as a young designer and with so much hard work being an entrepreneur in Nigeria, that such hard work and creativity and originality gets to be recognized. And I am absolutely thankful that platforms such as this exist. And I am happy that we emerged the winner. With anyone coming into the industry, it's vital that, you have such a clear storytelling, brand message, and all of that goes into the brand as a whole, and just remain consistent and, just start. If you haven't started, start.
While the overall winner will be sponsored to the 2023 Madrid Fashion Week, the first runner-up will participate in the Dakar Fashion Week in December, while the second and third runners-up receive fashion design and equipment. All the contestants will be sponsored to attend business management training.
Blind and visually impaired people often rely on walking sticks and guide dogs to help them navigate streets and sidewalks. But one Japanese startup is bringing navigation technology directly to their shoes. Tina Train reports.
For the blind and visually impaired, getting around often means using a guide dog or a walking stick. But in Japan, there are helpful clues right beneath your feet. Braille blocks.
It is famous in Japan, so they are everywhere in road in Japan.
These tactile pavement surfaces have spread across the world, guiding users with physical cues they can feel. Japanese startup Ashirase is taking the idea a step further, bringing the external sensations in.
How to realize braille block inside the shoe. This is our first point.
The Ashirase in-shoe navigation system guides users with vibrations and motion sensors placed inside their shoes.
There are 3 area vibrator inside the one device, and you need to use both devices on both shoes.
With the smart devices connected to an app via Bluetooth, users enter their destination and a route is mapped out. Motion sensors detect the direction a user is heading in and vibrate on either the left or right foot, indicating which way to go. The speed of vibrations also varies.
The tempo of vibration is corresponding to the distance to the corner. When user approach to the corner, tempo of vibration increases.
The developers say these cues allow blind and visually impaired users to focus on gathering other important information about their surroundings.
Ushers can follow the route so they can focus on the safety.
It's a vision for more freedom and autonomy. Tina Trin, VOA News, Las Vegas.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. To remember that channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Joker Rogers. Thanks for watching and goodbye.